If you don't got haters, you ain't poppin'. Josh Norman.
I loved it here. Never wanted to leave. All here.
Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. Leo Tolstoy.
Salisbury class of 2018, Carpe Diem, seize the day. Westminster class of 2019, Virtute et Nihil, great grace.
Good morning. My name is Riley Wood. The day I learned I was coming to Westminster was one of the worst days of my life. I know most of you probably celebrated when you received your acceptance letter. You had siblings or parents who were Martlets, and you looked forward to living in Williams Hill. But not me. For me, Westy had always been the enemy. Prior to coming to Westy, I lived at an all-boys school, 40 miles northwest of here, the Salisbury School. Salisbury felt like a paradise to me. The school campus was a hub of sports, activities, and outdoor possibilities. It was the perfect setting, which I roamed and conquered alongside my three best friends. We were all equally enthralled by the state-of-the-art athletic facilities, as well as the utopian natural landscape. We had it all, from hockey rinks to hiking trails, kayaks to turf fields, paddle boards and ping pong, tennis courts, basketball hoops, a pond, and even a lake. Sundays were always my favorite days at Salisbury. We'd wake up, head down to the fields and play touch football, shoot around with our lacrosse sticks, or find some other source of exercise. Then we trekked back up the hill to the dining hall, where we sat down and enjoyed a dining hall brunch together. After brunch, we headed over to the nearest house and cheered on our favorite NFL teams. Everything felt perfect, but I did not know my whole world was about to change. During the middle of my freshman year at Salisbury, my parents, without consulting me, decided it was in our best interest to move to Westminster School. I was obviously upset, not simply because we were moving, but because I felt my parents had blindsided me with a life-altering decision without even having a conversation. Like most 15-year-olds, I did not have the power to influence family policy, but my displeasure over their choice persisted. And so, I shut them out entirely. I lasted 2 full weeks without saying a word to either one of my parents. I did not eat their food, respond to their questions, or greet them in the hallways. My parents had no idea what to do. They worried they had made a big mistake. The situation was ultimately diffused by a shocking bribe from my parents. They agreed to buy me an Xbox. A sacrilegious gesture in our anti-video game home. My siblings were outraged. And although the Xbox provided me with immediate gratification, as well as a distraction from the unavoidable transformation that was about to take over my life, it did not suppress my deeper feeling of sadness about the eventual outcome of my future. My identity had to change. I'd been trained and raised to bleed crimson, but now I was forced to represent a new pair of colors. Arriving at Westminster, I immediately felt like an outsider. I struggled to embrace Westy as my school. Salisbury had always been my home, and I looked forward to going to school there, whereas Westy felt more like an obligation. I often found myself wearing Salisbury clothing, unable to let go of what I still consider my true home. I refused to assimilate. I even went as far as to wear my Salisbury tie to my third form picture day. On top of all that, I was still a new student at a brand new school. The first year was a major adjustment, and as Mr. Kendall loves to say, I was living in the gray area. And so, I embraced the gray. I stayed under the radar and out of the spotlight. Being a faculty kid was no help either. I was still a new student in a brand new environment, and I did not have the familiarity of the school, the teachers, and the community like my fellow fac grads. I was a freshman, but I lived in Squib, a dorm for upperclassmen, and rather than spending my nights bonding with my fellow third formers, I grew closer to the older kids who lived down the hall. My whole life was upside down. Another adjustment was returning to a co-ed school, something that made my former Salisbury classmates super jealous. At Salisbury, girls were just a figment of my imagination. But here, they were real people. I could talk to them and have them in my class. Attending a co-ed school was one of the few pros I felt Westy offered, but it made the switch even more complicated. Surprisingly, my third form year came and went rather quickly. I found a lot of success socially and created meaningful friendships I expect will continue for years to come. However, I faced a new struggle, one I had never experienced before. I struggled in the classroom. I was disinterested and disengaged, so I chose to spend my time socializing rather than hitting the books. My first year at Westminster, I received the worst grades of my life. But I did not blame myself for my lackluster performance. My parents were to blame. After all, they were the ones who thought it was a good idea to come here anyway. I did not see the self-destructive nature of my attitude. Instead, I was more concerned with how much fun I was having on a day-to-day basis. Sophomore year rolled around, and it was much of the same. You could hear my unenthused feet dragging through the halls of the atrium from a mile away. I again wasted time and put forth minimal effort in the classroom, staying as far away from any school-sanctioned event, group, or social gathering, except for the occasional dance or stud party. I would not go as far as to say I was anti-Westminster, but I definitely was not committed to being a positive member of the community. Still, my sophomore year did have some highlights. There was a slight improvement in my grades, and I created a stronger bond with my classmates who had moved out of alumni and into Squib. That October, we traveled to Salisbury for our annual clash on the soccer field. At the start of the game, I looked around at the opposing team and saw some of my best friends, as well as kids I looked up to. Once again, I dreamed of wearing the classic crimson jersey, but instead, I was trapped in the seemingly inferior black and gold. It still hurt to compete against the kids I thought of as teammates and as brothers. Yet, as my fifth form year rolled around, my outlook on Westy began to shift. Salisbury was becoming more distant. Spending time with my Salisbury friends started to sound almost foreign to me. They told stories of kids I did not know. They reminisced about memories we did not share. And I felt a chasm form between us. Something strange started happening. Slowly, Westy started to feel more like home. By the time I was a junior, my Salisbury gear began to shrink and fray and tear, while simultaneously, my Westy garb began claiming more and more real estate in my closet. I no longer felt like a kid who was missing out on something better. I was now seeing Westy as an opportunity, not an obligation. A few weeks ago, the first boys soccer team again made the trek up to the northwest corner for another match against Salisbury. A teammate asked me, "Are you excited to go see all your boys again?" I thought about it for a moment and realized most of my friends had graduated. I hardly knew anyone on the team. So no, I was not excited to see all my boys. Instead, I was excited to throw on the black and gold number 3 Westie jersey and compete alongside my Westminster teammates. I know Salisbury will always hold a place in my heart, but now I'm truly proud to say I'm a Martler. Most of us have another school we could attend, or another home we could live. At times, it seems like being here and living here means we're missing out on something bigger and better. But I've come to realize that if you just let go of that alternate reality, that other you that still plays football, that goes out on a Friday night, that sleeps in on a Saturday, that doesn't need a second layer of driving permissions, you will be surprised by how much better your Westminster life can be. Thank you.